I'll tell you straight, nobody ever expects to board a regular flight and walk away as the punchline of a headline. But that's what happened to me. Emily Carter, the kid pilot who landed Flight 782, though I swear I never meant to go viral. One minute I was just a 12-year-old obsessed with airplanes, like the kind of obsessed where my room looked like a tiny Smithsonian, and I could tell you the thrust output of a Boeing 737 before I'd even eaten breakfast. The next minute I was front and center in the wildest day of my life, a story that started with a tragedy and wound up somewhere between chaos and miracle. We weren't flying to Orlando for fun, you know. Mom, Captain Rachel Carter, was a drone pilot in the Air Force, and she died in a training accident. Dad and we were bringing her ashes back to her favorite beach. So, as you can imagine, there was nothing light about that morning. I remember the jet bridge, the smell of jet fuel, the clatter of rolling suitcases, stuff I usually loved, but this time I was all nerves trying to distract myself by counting rivets on the nose gear, memorizing every panel on that 737-800. Dad squeezed my hand, but my eyes were locked on the cockpit windows, and for one perfect second, I almost forgot why we were there. That's when Claire, the flight attendant, caught me staring and asked if I loved planes. I love them, I said, maybe too fast. She smiled, said maybe the captain could wave to me. We took our seats, 16A and 16B. Window and middle just like I like it. While other passengers lost themselves in movies or snacks, I watched every move on the tarmac, soaking it all in like it might save me. The captain's voice came on steady as a metronome, and I listened so closely I could hear his smile. It felt like everything was finally in place until it wasn't. 23 minutes in, just after I'd started to think maybe this would be a normal flight, I noticed something off in the cockpit. The door had cracked open a bit when the flight attendant brought in coffee. The co-pilot was slumped, weird mumbling, and the captain, who'd seemed so sure, suddenly dropped his mug and froze. "Dad, something's wrong," I whispered. He just looked at me confused, but I could tell. I'd spent enough hours in simulators to know when things go sideways. Then Claire, pale as a ghost, came over the intercom. "If there's anyone on board with flight experience, please come forward. Let me tell you, that sentence can clear the air faster than an open window at 30,000 feet. People chuckled, whispered, some thought it was a joke, but I didn't. I said I can do it. Dad almost laughed, then realized I wasn't kidding. I've flown this model for 3 years, on a sim. He started to argue, but then Claire called again, more desperate this time, and something inside me just snapped. I stood up, knees shaking, and stepped into the aisle, every eye in the cabin glued to the kid headed toward the cockpit. Claire looked at me like I'd just told her I was Santa Claus. "Where are your parents?" she asked. I told her I'm the one who can help. She hesitated, but when she peeked into the cockpit and saw both pilots out cold, she whispered, "Okay, come in." I won't pretend I was cool about it. The second I saw those controls, the real blinking, complicated panels, I nearly lost my nerve. The pilots weren't just asleep. They were gray-breathing shallow. The masks hadn't dropped. The autopilot was holding steady, but it wouldn't last. "Help me get them into the jump seats," I said, my voice shaking less than my hands. Slipping into the co-pilot seat, I suddenly felt like all those hours with my flight sim might actually mean something. I radioed out Mayday. "Mayday, this is Flight 782. Both pilots are unconscious." For a few seconds, just static, then a voice, "Say again, who is speaking?" I swallowed. "Emily Carter. I'm 12, I'm in the cockpit, the pilots are out." Silence. "Then did you say—" 12. "Yes. I know this plane, I can do this." The voice on the other end, Dana Walsh, the controller in Jacksonville, didn't waste time. "All right, Emily. Can you tell me your altitude?" I read it off, hands flying over screens and switches like I'd practiced 1,000 times. "Let's get you home," she said. Meanwhile, Claire closed the cockpit door behind me, promising to keep the passengers calm. "Don't tell them I'm a kid," I begged. She just nodded and said, "You're amazing." Which honestly was the first time I believed it might be true. Dana rerouted us to Augusta Regional, quiet, long runway, safer for someone who'd never actually landed a real jet. Suddenly, the fuel gauge started blinking, left tank draining faster. Dana talked me through it, balancing fuel, confirming autopilot was still set. I banked the plane to our new heading, the world outside tilting gently, and for a moment I forgot to be scared. Back in the cabin, tension simmered. People wanted answers. Why weren't we landing? Who was flying? Claire kept her cool, but eventually the rumor spread. A kid went into the cockpit. Panic brewed. Dad tried to calm them, but it wasn't easy. You could feel the pressure building like a storm cloud pressed against the cabin walls. Dana walked me through the descent, lowering to 24,000 feet, then 5,000. The lights flickered, voltage drop. "Switch to backup generator," she said. My hands were steady, more out of habit than confidence. The instrument stabilized. For a second, through the muffled cockpit door, I heard applause. Someone must have told them. But I just stared ahead and whispered, "Let's get this bird on the ground." As we got closer, Dana checked my approach. ILS engaged. Crosswinds hit. I gripped the yoke, instinct took over. I'd landed in worse conditions on the sim, but never with actual lives behind me, never with Dad sitting back there. "You're doing beautifully," Dana said. I wanted to believe her. Then the cabin pressure dropped. That's what got the pilots. "Are you okay?" Dana asked. "I'm fine. Adjusted early," I replied. "But the passengers?" Well, that was another story. Oxygen masks dropped. Claire worked overtime to keep people calm. Dad stood and told everyone, "The person flying this plane is my daughter, and she knows what she's doing." Some believed him. Most just prayed. Approach checklist, flaps, gear speed. The autopilot kicked off with a scream. Suddenly it was all me. I grabbed the yoke, feet on the pedals, muscles screaming. Outside the runway appeared lights like a landing strip for angels. "Landing checklist," Dana said. "Gear down, flaps full speed, brake armed. You've got it, Lil Captain," Dana said, her voice breaking. My hands moved like they belonged to someone else, braking, throttling back, holding center line through the gusts. I could hear my mother's voice. "Calm as your co-pilot." Wind shear rocked us last-second nerves, but I rode it out, leveled off, throttled back. 30 feet, then 20, then 10. My left hand pulled idle. The wheels kissed the tarmac, one bounce, then the roar of reversers, and we slowed straight down the center line. Cheers exploded behind me. In the tower, Dana was crying, I'm pretty sure. I finished the checklist like it was nothing. Dad burst into the cockpit, tears in his eyes. "You did it, baby." I blinked. Was that real? He hugged me tight. It was real. "And you saved us all." Captain Harris, the pilot, finally woke up. "You flew the plane," he croaked. The medic nodded. "Landed it too." The captain fumbled in his pocket and handed me his wings. "I've only given these away once. I'd be honored if you took them." I could barely answer. Stepping outside, I was swarmed, reporters, firefighters, flashbulbs popping. "She's just a kid," someone said. "No, she's a pilot," replied another. That's when it hit me. I hadn't just landed a plane, I'd done the impossible. The storm hit after we landed, thunder rolling over the airport. I stood there, rain running down my face, still feeling the yoke in my hands, Dad's arms around my shoulders, everyone crowding close just to say thank you. I didn't have words, not really. All I knew was that I wanted to fly again, not for the cameras, but for me, for Mom, for everyone who ever told a kid to sit down and let the adults handle it. The days after were a blur. Interviews, awards, a call from the president. Even my story showing up in the Smithsonian next to the seat I'd landed in. But it wasn't the medals or headlines that stuck with me. It was one letter from a girl in Pakistan. "Before I saw you, I thought girls like us couldn't fly. Now I know we can." That's the moment I understood. This wasn't just my story. I kept training, learning flying Cessnas, then twins. My instructor Tom always said, "If you ever land a jet again, I hope I'm not on board." I told him I'll make sure the autopilot works. At 15, I did my first solo flight. At the International Youth Aviation Summit, I stood on stage, hundreds of kids watching, and said, "Courage doesn't wait for permission. It just shows up. That's all you really need to know." So, yeah, when you ask, what does courage look like? Sometimes it looks like a 12-year-old girl with sweaty palms and a stubborn streak flying a Boeing 737 through a thunderstorm because nobody else could. You might call it luck or fate. I call it not giving up. And you know what? If you've got a dream, if you think you're too young, too small, too anything, maybe just remember my name and the day I prove the sky isn't off limits to anyone. Now let's open it up. What would you have done in my seat? Who gets to decide who's ready when everything's on the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about courage community and what it really means to take flight.
Xin chào các bạn, mình là Trinh, mình phụ trách viết content. Trên đây là những công việc của mình là mình lên mạng xã hội tìm hiểu những video
Hey, if you guys have any trouble, let somebody know, please.
After the tree to hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
the fence.